You're listening to the ChicoBag podcast. This is your place to learn about things that work in the spirit of making the world a better place. So today we're going to talk about jobs. Finding a job used to be hard, and now it's a different game entirely. There's more competition, there's more noise, less clarity about what actually works. And most people are flying blind, doing what feels right and wondering, like, why it's not working. My guest today is an expert in job search, and his quarterly trends report has been cited by the Wall Street Journal. He knows what's working and what isn't, and he's not shy about saying so. So I'm really happy to welcome Sam Wright. He's the head of operations and partnerships at Huntr. And Huntr's a bootstrapped 7-person company, and they serve over 500,000 people to navigate their job search. And on the side, he also farms on his family's land in northern Washington. So he's not afraid to get his hands dirty. So with that, let's dig in. Sam, welcome.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Andy. I'm excited to talk to you today.
So 500,000 people, that's a lot. That's a lot of people, and you have
Yeah.
kind of a niche market, right? As far as job search is concerned. So what are you doing differently?
Yeah, so what I would say, Andy, is there's a few factors that are going on. First, like job search is crazy right now for a lot of folks, especially in the tech sector, which is who we serve. So generally speaking, the folks that work with us at Huntr, where we help them to tailor their resume to match a job description, increasing their likelihood of getting an interview, are folks that are early in their career, so early career to mid career folks in the tech sector. So think software engineers, think UI UX developers, marketers, those types of folks. And what we're seeing is it's kind of like a what I'm calling the crisis of overachievers, where it's the folks that have really tried to do everything right? Like your honor roll kids, your dean's list kids, the people that were told by everyone that they're always going to land on their feet, just aren't landing on their feet right now, and are really having a come to it moment, right? Thinking about what is it, I did all of the things they told me to do, right? Society told me to do, and I'm struggling. And that's what I think is really motivating in our work at Huntr, where we're trying to offer kind of data back best practices for the job search. So thinking about, okay, it doesn't matter. I can talk all day about AI changing the world and all of these things about the future, but somebody needs a job today, right? They've got bills
Yeah.
due today. So there's this part of the work, which is figure out how to help somebody where they're at right now. And then how do we, and you and I share this in common, I think, how do we make the world a better place? How do we move forward to the ideas, the philosophies, the sort of even spiritual components of like improving how we are and how we as a society exist on this planet. And so that's kind of the connection between Huntr and the farming, and also why I feel like we're here today on this platform talking about it.
Awesome. So, what's the struggle? So what's the gap between what job seekers think is working and what you're finding?
I think there's a lot of just kind of fear out there that, so anytime that we have kind of chaos in a system, right, which is what this job search is, or this current job market is, there's a technological disruption happening right now. There's political disruption. All of it is creating chaos, and within chaos, there comes a lot of different sort of people that maybe for good reasons or for bad reasons are taking advantage of people who are maybe in a, I actually, I'm not meaning good reasons. It's hard to separate out what the intentions are of somebody who's trying to help, right? So what we see in the job search market is, because there's a lot of fear and an uncertainty as to, like, why is it, why am I not getting interviews, why am I not getting hired, then there's somebody that comes along and says, "Oh, I know why," and then all of a sudden, oh, okay, I'm listening to this person, and then I'm paying them $5,000 to help me with my resume, and guess what? That resume doesn't do anything for me. And that's literally a woman that I had met with a couple of weeks ago told me that exact situation. So what am I trying to do within that? It's data-backed best practices for the job search. And we've analyzed over 1.7 million applications to learn like, okay, you can have a two-page resume. Okay, what's the best way to build a resume? Well, it's putting your best foot forward, leading with the most interesting metrics and statistics about you in your summary section, or listing all of the skills that are most relevant to the job that you're applying to. So there's all these things that are actually kind of common sense, um, that really cut through the noise, where there's a lot of folks out there that are going to tell you you have to blame, this applicant tracking system, or you have to, you have to do it this way, and buy my course on networking, and it's a lot of it is distraction from what are the true best practices, and so that's what we're trying to offer.
So I think the cool thing about your platform is that you have a feedback loop. So you know
Yeah,
like what's working, what's not working. And from what I gather from your website, every job that you apply for requires a different resume. It's you still, but just formatted differently, highlighting certain things for different jobs. Same thing with the cover letter. Traditionally that's a lot of work. That's what I guess some
yeah,
people maybe aspire to, but don't do, or they do it poorly.
yeah.
Um, did I get it right? So that like really you're optimizing to have the highest like response rate as far as getting
Yeah,
interviews, right?
yeah, that's exactly right, Andy. And it's really actually all the data just sort of points to common sense, which is the person that's the best fit for the role is the most likely to get an interview for that role. And it's easier said than done. A lot of people are not good salespeople. And the
Yeah.
job search is fundamentally a sales process. It's a funnel, right? You have conversion rates, you have a certain number of leads, right, which are applications or job
Yeah.
opportunities, and then they're going to convert at a certain rate to interviews, and then interviews are going to convert at a certain rate to offers. Most people are terrible at sales. In fact, some of the
Yeah.
best people, the best workers, the smartest people are not going to be the best salespeople. And so part of my job is, yeah, we're sharing this data, and then also sometimes it comes down to uh, a resume being a reflection of how someone sees themselves. And that's advice a career coach mentor of mine shared with me, Kathy Caprino, shout out. And yeah, so a lot of folks are needing to learn those sales skills to put their best foot forward, learn how to tailor their resume to match every single job description, speak to the language of that specific hiring manager or recruiter, leading to the best, most likely chance of getting an interview.
Yeah, I could see, people don't want to be boastful. They
Yeah,
maybe they're downplaying some of their accomplishments because they don't want to seem, you know, conceited.
right. Yeah.
But really having someone help you with the resume is the way to kind of break through that, right? And that's what your service does.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think people shouldn't search for jobs alone. For some reason, we make it this kind of taboo thing where if you're unemployed and it's taking you a long time to find work, you're ashamed of it, you're embarrassed of it. We've made it this like individual thing to go like hide in your room and bang your head against the wall trying to figure out what works. It shouldn't be that. Like every single person is struggling in this job market. I get on with calls with people that have done hundreds of millions of dollars in sales, like tech executives, that are
Yeah.
struggling to find work. Like people would be shocked. The people that I talk to, these are people that are probably millionaires that are struggling to find work, and that are yeah, they have bills to pay, lifestyle creep, right? Like, so these are people that have a mortgage that's a very expensive mortgage, and they're struggling to find work. So we really have done a poor job as a society, shaming people that are unemployed or have been unemployed for a long time, making it an individual problem when really it's a collective one.
Yeah. So you give free one-to-one coaching to job seekers. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's kind of yeah. What I was touching on there is yeah. Anybody who wants to, I'll meet with for 15 minutes. It's how I start my day. Every day, I do about 5 to 10 free job search support calls. 15 minutes. We usually look at the resume. We look at the LinkedIn. I share the data that I have, and I also just listen to what's going on in that person's job search experience. That helps us build better products at Huntr, and it grounds me into the realities of the job search. And I don't, and like I said, I don't care if you're an executive at a Fortune 500 company, or you're trying to get a job at Target. I literally in the past month have met with both of those people, and share whatever I can do, however I can do it, to just make hopefully some impact in that person's job search, because I know that ultimately could make a big impact in their life, and in the life of their families, and that of their communities.
I love that. I always talk about win-wins, right? And that's an example
Yep,
of it where, you're getting, the intel that you need to improve your product. They're getting something
yeah,
of value as well. Um,
totally.
one topic I always like to talk about is just the idea of, doing something you're passionate about. And, a lot of times people will trade a high paying job for a lower paying job if it's something that they love. And I know that's your case, right? You took a pay cut to move over to Hunter. Can you talk a little bit about that dynamic? Because there's a lot of people who are hiring people and
Yeah,
struggling to find good talent, and then there's a
yeah,
lot of talent that's struggling to find a good job, and
yeah.
sometimes there's just like this mismatch of between culture and purpose. And so, can you talk to that as far as in your
Yeah,
experience?
somewhere on one of my feeds at one point in life, somebody came on and gave this career advice and said, you should be learning or earning at every job that you're at. And if you're doing neither, ideally you should be doing both. But if you're doing neither, then you should probably go find another job. And at my job prior to this, I was definitely earning. I was earning more money, but I wasn't feeling like I was learning, and I wanted to really learn. I had had a startup that had failed, and was in that kind of process of thinking about, why did I fail doing that. Oh, okay, I didn't have the right partner, the right person that's more of a technical side. I'm more of the business side and the sales side. And so I was like, I want to go find somebody who I can really learn from. And that's where I found Reddy at Huntr. He was a solo founder. He was hiring an account executive as his first hire. And I was just blown away by the platform that he built, the quality of it as a one person team. I mean, he built something that it would look like a team of 30 people built. And so I was like, I need to learn from this person. And I think, like,
Yeah,
trying, if I can give like one good piece of advice, it is find like the smartest person that you respect the most if you're in business, or really whatever you're doing, and work for them. That's like the early stage career advice, because
yeah,
that's going to be worth more than your entire college education, and any training that you have. If you find that person that you're like, I want to understand how you have done this, or how you've gotten to where you are, I'm willing to work for you and to take any job to learn more and figure it out. And fast forward 4 years later, I think I've gotten more than like I don't know, a Harvard MBA education level, in sort of startup entrepreneurship, how to build a business, all the ins and outs, and experiencing all of those things. And so yeah, oftentimes I think, it's not just doing what you love, but it's finding the people that you admire and respect and want to do it with
yeah.
them, and that's really important.
And you made a important distinction there, is to respect too. So,
Hmm.
there's a lot of people that are successful, and are making a ton of money and doing awesome things, yet, they're not
Yeah, yeah,
necessarily of good moral character, so having someone that
totally.
you respect as well, I think is a key distinction, especially if you're going to be learning from them. Um,
Sorry, just
so,
plugging it.
oh,
Yeah, back.
yeah.
Yeah.
Which kind of leads into like another line of thinking that I was having prior to hopping on the podcast with you, is this idea of, today's workforce. It's more of like a gig, or shorter term thinking. Like, back in the day, it was like, oh, I got a job and I want to get the gold watch before I retire. And, that's it. And now it's,
Yeah.
it's more short term. So, you have this entrepreneurial spirit. You're working for an entrepreneur. You're gaining, a bunch of knowledge that you could take, to your next adventure. Um, so talk about a little bit about that as far as, people that are listening to this that are employers. What do they need to know about today's workforce,
Mm.
um, in regard to the short-term thinking?
Yeah, I think that a lot of people. So I mean, I guess we've hired folks here at Hunter. I talk to folks that are employers, hiring managers, recruiters, and I think like a lot of job seekers or people are kind of feeling a bit duped by the system. I think rightfully so. That
Yeah,
like I said, they feel like they've kind of done a lot of things right, and then all of a sudden they're getting ghosted, or it's becoming really hard to, whether it's finding a job or even like the big problem is even those folks, Andy, that are employed right now, they are not satisfied. I think there's a tune of like 40% of folks that are, looking for other jobs. Even in this job market that's so crazy, there's still people that are so unhappy with where they're at with their current
yeah,
employment, that they're wanting to make a change. So there's a big systemic problem there. I think that's where it comes back to trust and building really good relationships. I think that that's so healthy, and yeah, again, it comes back to, and then that starts at like when you are applying to jobs, you should also be evaluating, is this somebody that like if things are hard, are they going to stand by me, or is there going to be mutual trust, mutual respect, as you mentioned as well, um, that we can kind of get through these things. And big corporations, we're increasingly learning, are not it, right? Like there was idea. I grew up in the Seattle area, went to school in University of Washington. Amazon was like the like top notch, like, oh my God, he got an internship at Amazon, or did you hear about so and so, they're going to go work for Amazon. And that meant social, like climbing the social ladder, right? That meant socioeconomic progress within your family, oftentimes. So not so much anymore, right? When you see 40,000 layoffs and you see that continuing to increase, it turns out a lot of corporations don't really care about the individual; they care about the bottom line. So I do think that we are, and I hope that we're going to start to see a little bit more small teams, 5, 10 people, like at Hunter, that are building, that are doing right by their employees, doing the best they can. It's not to say that they might have to do layoffs and things like this, but that they're being honest, and they're being and they have best interests at heart. And I think that that comes to when we have corporations that are treating people, not us treating corporations as people. If Yeah, maybe
yeah.
a little political there, but really
Well,
getting
this
at like, yeah, the individuals.
this is one of my favorite topics. Is
Yeah.
this idea of a corporation. Back in the '60s. As dead economists said, the only real social responsibility of a company is to make a profit, right?
Hmm.
And in the pursuit of profit, all the other things are going to be resolved. And we found, now whatever it is, 60 years later, like it's not true. It's
Yeah.
not true at all. It's companies, you know, that only care about profit are kind of like psychopaths. You got to care about more than a profit. And the companies that are doing well financially, it turns out, also are caring more about profit. They have a purpose greater than just profit. And then there's a local coffee place in my town. Their purpose is not only to serve great coffee, but it is to develop young people in their
Hmm.
first job to be great employees or great, contributors to
Yeah.
society, so that they're set up to get their next job. So that's what they see their purpose as. So they hire young
Yeah.
people that are energetic, and vibrant, and it works for them as far as coffee business. And they know these people are not going to be with them forever. They're going to move on and graduate from college and, and get different jobs. Um, and and in pursuit of that purpose, people flock to this place because of
Yeah.
just the energy that these employees have. So it's one of those win-wins again, where it's like, if they just treated the bottom line, they wouldn't make as much money as having a dual purpose of serving great coffee and developing people.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think like we need to lift those types of stories up, right? Like that's the idea is making sure that we're internalizing the value of what they're doing through that support, through whether it's paying higher prices, whether it's more people going and supporting. Because yeah, I think that the future in a lot of ways is those types of companies that are increasingly probably more and more local, right?
Yeah.
And supporting local community, I think is just a huge value add, and hopefully the future. I mean, it's the future I want to live in is where those types of coffee shops succeed.
Yeah, that's the future I want too. Because I mean, it's called responsible business.
Yeah.
It's caring for the community, the place, the people. We're
Mhm.
in and taking ownership of your impact.
Yeah.
And it's when you're just looking at profit, a lot of those things become negotiable, and that's just
Hmm.
not the world I want to live in either.
Yep.
Um, so speaking of values,
Yeah.
you have a bit of a side hustle. I mean, is it a business or a hobby or what is exactly? You have a farm,
Yeah.
a family farm.
Well. So yeah, let me for the record, it's yeah. My family has a fifth generation small farm in Western Washington. Both of my brothers are full-time farmers. I call myself a part-time farmer, so I'm not. That's my uncle and my brother's business. My dad's a part of it. My both my brothers are full-time on the farm. I help out when and where I can, and I've done many farmers markets over the years, and yeah, helps pick beans at 9 p.m. when it's a tough pick day and the sun's going down in the summer. But yeah, but what that really has instilled in me is this idea of part-time farming, and it's an identity that I've taken on. Part-time farmer underscore Sam on Instagram. But yeah, it's shout out. But part-time farming is the idea that if we all took about 10 hours a week and we got our hands in the soil and we were growing food and maybe we were doing it together and maybe we designed our whole communities around this idea that we could grow food together, it's going to get more of our basic needs met within our communities. People are going to be healthier, people are going to be happier, there's going to be more of a connection to community, and all of that stuff feeds into a better planet with less carbon emissions, with less pollutants. And I think it just will create more resilient communities in this space of all this chaos that's going on a national level and international level. I think it's one of the best things that we could do is imagine a world where everybody was a part-time farmer, and that's the world that when we're talking about worlds we don't want to live in, the worlds we do, that's the world I want to live in, and I think it could be a really special place. And I'm kind of dedicating my life towards that sort of mission and vision, and it turns out I've been kind of part-time farming all over the world, coming live from Brazil right now, where I've done a lot of visited a lot of different farms, volunteered on specifically within syntropic agriculture, agroforestry down here, but in India, in Colombia, across the United States. Yeah, I really love this kind of part-time farmer idea and lifestyle.
Yeah, it's good for your soul. It's good.
Yeah,
And it's, when you have a tough day, there's nothing like, unwinding a little bit, get your hands dirty,
yeah,
and reaping the reward of, of the work that you did the week prior or the month prior. Um,
yeah.
myself, I have a suburban home, so I have a, backyard, front yard, and, I'm not really good at gardening, but what I've found is fruit trees. Like if I plant a
Mm,
fruit tree, I don't have to do
nice.
much,
Yeah,
you know? I don't have to
yeah,
do much at all. And I got oranges in the fall, I got cherries and peaches and in the spring,
yeah.
and it's great. And there's nothing
That's
like
awesome.
going out and getting a fresh tree ripened peach right off the tree,
Hmm.
It's still a little
Yeah,
warm from the sunshine. It tastes so good.
that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the idea around syntropic agriculture and agroforestry, right? Is like we can be growing more fruit and nut trees, and then grow other crops in the shade of those trees. But just generally speaking, it's crazy to me that we don't have more, fruit and nut trees that are around that people can be, consuming and enjoying. There's so much, especially in suburban areas, that's just like kind of this grass that's a big pain to mow, and takes the fuel and all of that. And so yeah, I love that. I think
Hmm.
if everybody should have access to a good apple tree, right, or a good peach tree wherever you are in the world, or good bananas, whatever it is. But I think that's a big part of the idea is doing what you can with what you have
Yeah.
available.
It
Yeah.
reminds me, there's a street. I live in Chico, California. That's why we call the
Oh,
business
nice.
ChicoBag,
Yep, yep.
partially.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a street called Orange Street, and back in the day, it had oranges on Orange
That's
Street.
awesome. Yeah,
But not anymore. The trees, have kind of aged out, and it would be a nice thing to bring back, I think. Um,
totally.
that idea that you could just, go down the street, you see an orange, it's a public tree, you can pick it and eat it and go on, with your day. So
100%.
I know that farming. I was thinking about all the idioms we use, in the English language around farming, and we use a lot of farming terms in business and in job, like when you're like looking for a job, you're out there networking, you're planting seeds,
Yep.
so what other kind of farm wisdom do you use, in your workday?
That's kind of funny. Yeah, I saw one low-hanging fruit, and we talk about that all the time in the startup entrepreneurial world. You're always looking for the low-hanging fruit, the thing that you can reach for right today. That's going to be the easiest thing that you can do to make an impact. Oftentimes, it feels like it's never there. Sometimes you're always reaching for a little bit farther up the tree. Um, but yeah, no, I mean, I think that. One of the biggest things is soil health is what I am
Mm.
really into. Because most people, when they say they're not good farmers, usually are just or not good gardeners. It's usually a soil problem, right? It's usually
Oh.
your foundation, your nitrogen deficient, your phosphorus, your potassium. You don't have that foundation. You can think of it as the same as where you're raising a child, or where you're growing a business, or where you're planting a seed. If the base isn't there of full of nutrients and just ready to hold water and support life and all of that, then everything's going to be a struggle. Even if that seed sprouts, it's the life of that plant, that seed, that's going to be a struggle for the entire time. Um, and business is the same way. I don't think there's any shortcuts in farming, and there's no shortcuts in business. You have to have good fertile soil, a good foundation to work off of and to build off of. And if not, everything's going to be really tough from there. So doing the right things early on and taking the time to build correctly, I think pays dividends over the entire lifetime.
Yeah, I think about in a business environment, culture, in some ways
Yep.
is the soil, right? You
Yep.
need to have a
Hmm.
culture that supports, the objectives and the business goals that you have. Like, for example,
Agriculture,
speaking,
right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I guess is that that's the root, right?
Yep.
Um, like what else?
Yeah, I mean,
Either,
off of that, yeah, like exactly what you're saying. Agriculture is like the root is like that what we how we farm and the systems that we have inform and create the culture that we exist in and that we live in. And so I think with regards to businesses as well, it's that culture usually comes from the top. So it comes back to the idea of working for someone you really respect and admire and want to learn from, because that person, especially if it's the founder of a company, they're the one that set the tone from the very beginning, right? And that's why I
yeah,
have a lot of respect for Rennie and how he's built his business. Is he really, for 3 4 years, he just spent tending the soil. He wasn't hiring people. He was just building the foundations of a business that would be a good business to run and to grow. And so yeah, that's the I think a great one is the culture comes from the top, and really look for that, and because otherwise you're just not going to have fun. You're not going to have a good time working for people that are doing things that you know and you feel in your heart that it's not the way you'd want it to be run, and you don't think it's right. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, I have a friend that's in that situation where he loves the company, he loves the technology, but the culture is horrible, and
Yeah.
he's going to leave, and
Yeah.
they're going to lose out, and that's a real shame. What about don't put all your eggs in one basket?
Yeah, diversify, man. Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing in agriculture that I also see. Instead of having monoculture, and the idea of don't put your eggs in one basket, it's diversity really brings innovation, diversity of thought, diversity of opinion, diversity of the different backgrounds that have led people to the beliefs and insights that they have today. I think that that's a huge piece. And the same thing we learned the hard way many times, not to put your eggs in one basket in terms of how you market or sell your product. When one thing's working, uh, don't neglect all the other things, because you're like, this is it. We're just going to run with this. I think that's again good foundation, diversifying, and recognizing that even the things that are the maybe the least or less what you see as less valuable maybe are a good pillar foundation in a way that you didn't really realize, and you still want to continue to support. So yeah, diversify. I love that one. That's good.
That's a really good point. I like to ask, when we have a meeting, there's a bunch of people around the table. I always like to think, like, who's not at this table right now? Like, who's
Yep.
not represented? Who do we need to represent that's not here? And it's interesting because, a lot of times, we realize very quickly that, we don't have all the information to make a really good decision. And we got a huge number of blind spots. And so diversity in thought, helps you make better decisions. It's a great thing. What else? How about you reap what you sow?
I think that's another great one. Reap what you sow. I mean, I think in my sort of philosophy and even spirituality, really around kind of syntropic agriculture and agroforestry. This is the idea of farming in 3D spaces, using different types of plants that are complementary to others, planting the right things at the right time for the right soil, and so I always think of like with the reaping what you sow, we're in a very sort of a system that's really prioritizes short-term profits. And that's in our agriculture system, but it's also our business system. They reflect each other. And so, when thinking about what you're sowing, even the idea of planting trees that the shade of which you'll never see, right, is kind of yeah, a butchered version of the adage, right? Like,
Yeah.
a lot of things that we could do today we're not going to see the immediate benefit, but it is the correct thing to do for the long term, and in the long term. And I think, in business and in life, I think especially and sometimes we see this in American culture more so than some cultures. I know there's the book Farming of 40 Centuries of in China and in Japan and in these places, there's very different agricultural systems set up with very different cultures, oftentimes thinking about some of the longer term. But because American society kind of was in this expansionist sort of land was so cheap, we didn't even have to, you know, care for this one patch. We just moved to the next one because there was so much of it when the colonists came over and started to take over. Um, and so, yeah, I think that we reap what we sow, whether we like it or not. And the best thing to sow is something that has benefit long term, for you, for your family, and for society.
Yeah. What comes to mind for me when you say all this is, the idea of working with nature instead against nature.
Hmm.
That the idea of a monoculture, is where it's you got one crop and you have to essentially work against nature,
That's right.
by putting in fertilizer and pesticides. And you talked about complementary plants, where if you are working with nature, you're putting plants together that
Yeah.
automatically, help each other thrive. I think about, trying to swim upstream, right? So, like in the job search and in the business environment, it's always good to leverage the natural systems, what's already
Mm-hmm.
there, for your benefit, and not try to
Mm-hmm.
fight against things that it's going to take more energy, time, and effort, and get worse results.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, my sort of the mentor I see within my farming lens of things is Ernst Go. She's the founder of Syntropic Agriculture, a Swiss farmer down here in Brazil. And what he shared when I went to a course with him is we are a part of an intelligent system, and humans are nature. And what we need to do is become really amazing observers. Observe what's going on within nature, observe, and we can do this in life as well. I think all of us, including me, I like to talk. Sometimes talk before we listen, and I think that that's really important advice in business and in life. Um, and that's what I try to do with these 15-minute free one-on-one job search support calls. Is I start them by listening because I want to hear what's
Yeah.
going on with that person because every single individual is different, and every single environment is different. Every single farm is different, so we have to start by observing and then working with whatever the natural environment is there is going to have the best response. Yeah, that's a really important point.
Here's kind of an obscure one. I'm curious what your take is on it. Fallow ground.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of follow. So okay, so there's a few things here. I love these. You're really getting into it for me. Yeah. So running ground that is fallow. There's a few strange ideas that we have in sort of westernized agriculture. I would say. I mean, um, fallow can be great. Like leaving a field to have the hay grow and then let it fall and then let those nutrients sort of go back into the soil and start to build more topsoil by mining some of those nutrients down below with the soil mycorrhizae. So that can be a great process, and that was something my great uncle he started our farm after going to Woodstock. Is he was known as the hippy dippy farmer with him and his brother. One of the first organic farms in Western Washington. He let a lot of land go fallow, a lot of land to go rest. Um, but I think some people look at land and they sometimes call it like, it's barren land, or this land is no good, right? It doesn't grow well, or we've started to kind of like
Wait, it's
classify.
wasteland.
Yeah, it's wasteland. Oh man, right. Like, and this guy Ernst Gosch that I went and learned from, he bought land that was literally, I think, man, I'm gonna forget the name, but basically it meant bad land in Portuguese. It was like this is the worst land. Nobody's gonna ever grow anything. And over 40 years, he created a forest, a food forest, with the predominant crop being cocoa, for chocolate, and it's a paradise. And he created this through working with nature, through growing whatever trees and plants would grow there, through radically trimming those to form more topsoil, to build something up. And you can do that in so many places that we're not doing. And so often we'll look at land and think that like, oh, it's barren, or it's wasteland. Not necessarily fallow, because fallow just is like, it's sitting, and could be used. Um, but yeah, I think that's a really important thing. It's like, how do we view things, and how do we view things from a growth mindset lens of like, oh, you can build a paradise on wasteland. I've seen it done on multiple continents now. It's just about having the will, the resources, the access to land, which is a huge problem. 60% of young farmers in the U.S. don't have secure access to land. But yeah, there's so much there. But yeah, you can do a lot with a little.
Or I'll give you one last one
Yeah.
before we wrap up here. Weed your garden.
Weed your garden. I also think about like like cut the bad fruit off the tree a little bit. So
Yeah.
one thing is like a little bit about like weeds, like the concept of a weed is kind of a strange thing. Like some weeds are actually like great edibles that have a lot of good vitamins in them, right? We just treat them as weeds, like dandelions, actually, dandelion tea and dandelion root have a lot of medicinal properties. So what is a weed is something we should always really be thinking about and conscious of. When I'm looking at a system, and whether that's in business or whether it's in farming, it's does that thing support the propagation of more life and more biodiversity, or is that plant harming the ecosystem as a whole or causing encroachment into other life and more biodiversity? So is it being copacetic? Is it being a good neighbor, right? Or is it overtaking? Is it over consuming? And that's where we as humans have a really special role in nature because we have the chainsaw, we have the shears, we have the plow, we have these like different tools to be cultivators and shepherds of biodiversity and of life itself. And so I think weeding can be very important selectively and thinking about what is the best thing for this system as a whole, including me, including my family, including my community, but also including all of these different life forms that exist within this space. Does it make sense to remove this one plant for the good of the whole system? Same as in
Yeah, when you
business.
say all that, like, yeah, I see the application of business too. It's like, you
100%.
know, yeah, we're distracted and, I can weed out probably some of the apps on my phone that are
Hmm.
not adding to my life. I
Yep.
could probably weed out some of the subscriptions, in my
Hmm.
inbox, that
Yeah.
are distracting me from what I really need to be working on.
Yeah.
Yeah, so weeding your garden. So I want to wrap up here. I'm wondering, is there any last thoughts or how do people connect with you or can you share something to wrap up this podcast?
Yeah, of course. Again, love to meet anybody and everybody listening to this on LinkedIn. If you're job searching, I'm happy to meet with you for free 15-minute chat. I have about 20-25 slots available each week. So you can always, if you need support with your job search, reach out there. Part-time farmer underscore Sam on Instagram. That's where you can get into my more farming sort of internet ego and life, and really love meeting with people just like you, Andy, that, I think just how we met was through a LinkedIn DM and you were just told me, hey, like I try to meet with people that are trying to do good things in the world and make the world a better place. And that really resonated with me. One call later and we're doing this chat. And so, yeah, I think small communities can have huge impact, right? And any individual listening to this who spent some time out of their day to hear us. Yeah, I'd love to connect with and to truly sort of work with and relate to, because hopefully we can make some big things happen in the world for the better.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam, so much for being here. And yeah, keep up the great work.
Yeah. Thanks, Andy.